Hello, today we're going to talk about carbohydrates, what they are, their use in ATP, and then some polymers and disaccharides. So first off, what are carbohydrates? They're, as the name suggests, carbon and then hydrate, so water. For that reason, they're made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the building blocks for life, essentially. And they're the most abundant organic molecules on Earth, which is a little fun fact there. They're really important for predominantly chemical energy. They're the fuel for all cells. They're used in production of ATP through glycolysis or cellular respiration. And they're the product of photosynthesis, meaning they're sort of the building block of any food chain. Down here we have glucose, which is that monomer that's super prevalent, sort of the main carbohydrate monomer, used in cellular respiration, glycolysis, photosynthesis, very prevalent. And cellulose, which is more of a structural thing, seen a lot in plants. Plants are predominantly cellulose. It's what makes up their structure. Now, as I said before, they're used for production of ATP, to either cellular respiration or glycolysis, depending whether it's aerobic with oxygen or anaerobic without oxygen. ATP, of course, adenine triphosphate, sort of the cellular energy in a way. Yeah, photosynthesis down here. It says carbohydrate, but it's glucose. Also, second function, structural. This is a chain of cellulose, like we saw in the previous slide, right here. And essentially, because it's so predominant, as I said, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, it forms at the basis of most organisms, which is why they're useful for structure. All right. Now, at least all those two processes, they're kind of inverses if you look at them. Photosynthesis and respiration, in that they sort of have opposite products. So this uses glucose and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water for cellular respiration, and photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide, water to produce carbohydrates and oxygen, of course, with sunlight and chlorophyll in the way. As we'll see in a second here, they help cycle carbon in ecosystems, and that's very important because it sort of allows organisms to both get energy, have structure, and also continue on. It's a cycle in that things will continue to be able to use these products and continue to create energy and form structure. Disaccharides. So we saw previously the monomer of glucose and the polymer of cellulose. Those are all well and good, but a lot of what happens, particularly in food digestion, heterotrophs, is you have these sort of disaccharides. So mono, di, poly, one too many. And sucrose actually is like table sugar. You can see it's formed with the monomer of glucose and fructose. It's called dehydration synthesis, this process of forming these disaccharides, because essentially you're losing a water in the way. You can see the OH and the H from either side. So you're net losing water or water molecules to produce this glycosidic bond. That just means that a bond between two saccharides, between two sugar molecules. Now, I mentioned that it's useful. It's sort of common in heterotrophs because often you'll see this process happening in reverse, the glycosidic bonds being removed, because as we saw before, the primary monomer of cellular respiration is glucose, or one of these. So you're going to try to basically form it back into the simple sugars. Disaccharides actually resemble monosaccharides pretty well. They're soluble in water. They taste sweet, which is not also true for polymers. Cellulose, for example, not soluble in water, which is good because then plants would be soluble. It'd be bad. And yeah. All right, so these are both polymers, cellulose and glycogen, but they're different because they have different structure and different function. Cellulose we saw previously, structural, and for that reason it's non-branched. It has very strong glycosidic bonds, and that's important because you want your structure to be strong if you're a plant. Glycogen, kind of the opposite. It's branched. It's used for energy storage. And for that reason, it's easier to break down, meaning easier to form ATP. And it's the same underlying components, right? It's the same carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but the bonding produces different effects, and that's sort of indicative of a greater trend of structure affecting function. These are of course N-mers, so like this is not the full chain. You would see this like many times over, as indicated by this, but this is the easiest way to show it on the slide. And of course, the structure and function affects how animals and how organisms use these. Glycogen, common in animals, cellulose, plants, though, and cellulose, though it's difficult to break down because it's used for structure. For animals that consume plants, right? So herbivores, that they have some way to break down cellulose, either through enzymes or like ruminants, so extra stomachs, special organ systems, or just organs. Thank you for watching.